Hi, James. Thanks for coming on to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Andy. Real pleasure.
I was really excited to get you on, James. It's taken us a little while to get this together because you're a busy man. You're in and out of the country.
Yeah,
You've just got married. You're spending some
yeah,
time in Russia. But you've got a really interesting story, and I don't know all of your story, but the bits and pieces that I have picked up on have really caught my attention, and I'm really fascinated by how you've made a huge impact on social media, and you've got a great personality in the way you come across on social media. So I was really keen to get you on the show. Um, so James, what we like to do on the podcast is sort of learn a little bit more about our guests before we get stuck into the detail. Could you tell me and our guests a little bit more about you and what you're currently doing in the property world?
yeah, sure. So basically, I've got a current portfolio of three properties. Two are uh, supposed to be buy to lets, but we run them on like a room rate basis. So we run them as like we charge by the room, which is kind of like the HMO model, and then so they're in my limited company, and I've got one investment which is a HMO, and that's in my personal name as well. Um, so yeah, like from growing up as a kid, my parents who had probably the biggest influence. My dad was always building, always on the DIY, and my mum was like the head of the interior design. So, she'd be the boss. She'd make the decisions on what would happen. So I guess that's kind of where my initial kind of like interest for property came from. But I can't sit here and say to the listeners that that's what I wanted to do, because it really wasn't. Like, I grew up playing a lot of football, played for like Leeds United and stuff, and it gets to the point where you realise that like 18 years old, and for whatever reason you're not good enough or whatever it might be, I wasn't going to make it for an income what I wanted from. At the time I was also playing like semi professional football as well, and it was pocket money. So I had to make a decision on what I wanted to do. So I ended up going to university to study and become what I wanted to be, was a lecturer, do like the masters and the PhD, and follow that kind of academic path. But yeah, like that's when got my first interest in property, when I realised how much money landlords were making from students. It didn't take an expert to realise that five lads in a house paying an average £95 a week, it's about just shy of 25 grand a year, which was like the more or less the average salary back then. So that's where I got my real interest, really, from property, I would say.
Yeah, well, that kind of rent roll that people see often does people's interests.
Yeah.
Spoke to a lot of people who come on the show, and not long after kind of graduating, I saw that this model could be really good. And James, are you now full time in property, or are you still working on the side?
Yeah, so that's interesting. So I am technically full time in property, but I do have a couple of like other jobs and businesses. So I am also a kitchen sales and designer. So that's kind of like one of the jobs,
Right.
but that's a bit less interesting. But perhaps more interesting towards the podcast is I do have like a virtual tour business as well. So, oh, by the way, Andy, if you ever want any virtual tours for your
Yeah,
portfolio, I'm here. I'm joking, but no. But one thing on that which is
that was it.
amazing. Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, just on that note, like I've been able to rent. So we've got 9 rooms in total. We've been able to rent like all 9 rooms just off the virtual tours, which is pretty cool. Obviously during COVID
Yeah.
times as well. I'm sure you can imagine it was difficult with the physical viewings and stuff. And that also kind of tied in with the brand, with our brand. It's where like Libra Spaces, which is our property brand, and then James Property, which is a social media kind of thing. Um, it's branding so important. If you have the virtual tour accompanied by like high spec designs, like we were able to rent out a property that I've just finished now without, during mid refurbishment, like the en-suites weren't even built, and they'd already signed the contracts like way in advance. So yeah, that's kind of like why branding's important.
I totally agree, and I love your brand. I love the Libra Spaces look and what I've seen you do on your social media. And it's not just the brand of your properties now; it's the brand. Yeah, it's your whole brand, your personal brand, your business
Yeah.
brand, which is really, really cool to see on social media. So you've got got a few properties under your belt, and before we kicked off, I've sort of just briefly asked you what was the plan, and because I know that you recently got married, and Cushy's
Yeah.
over in Russia still, and
Yeah.
you're balancing that, and you sort of talked about, not quite sure exactly what the future holds and where you'll end up, but you did talk about your ambitions in property. Kind of where do you want it all to go, James? Like how big are your ambitions? What are you thinking?
Yeah, so while I'm kind of young and energetic, I definitely want to get a few more under my belt. And my wife, Kush, she has a huge interest. Her job in Russia is also to sell like high-end, like multi-million-pound apartments in Moscow. So she's got like that nice job, and I'm stuck at the other end with the the £50,000 houses, and dealing with damps and leaks and everything. But so Kush is going to come over, and together we're going to build our own portfolio together. And the plan eventually will be to have enough properties which we are comfortable to live on off the income, without stopping us doing anything. So we like to travel a lot. So I met my wife in Bali, and she absolutely loves traveling, and I want to be able to give her that, not traveling and not worrying about the income back home and things like that, and having systems in place to manage that. So that's kind of where we want to be, and commercial development is something I want to go into probably after a couple more HMOs and buy-to-lets. That's where I want to be aiming.
Yeah, well, I definitely like the sound of all that, James.
Yeah.
So we've got a really cool case study to talk about today. I'm really excited to chat about that. It's a really interesting case study and a
Yeah, me
really good
too.
example of how not to do it. I think you could probably agree that that's the case. But huge learning curve for you and a really
Yeah,
interesting
huge.
case study. And I remember you talking a lot about this and asking for a bit of help and support in the community. So actually, to kind of read the full story and see it all unravel. And fortunately, the way it did was great to see in the end. But I know it was a challenge, so I'm really keen to chat to you about that project today. But before we do that, I want to talk about social media. It's a big part of a lot of what we do, particularly with the podcast and as investors and raising finance to buy properties and things like that. And I followed your stuff from a very early stage, and we exchanged some messages and stuff
Yeah,
like that.
likewise. Yeah.
And it's been really cool to see you grow your account. But one thing that's really clear with you is you've done it in a very different way to a lot of people. And I think that is incredibly difficult to do with so many people active on social media and so much noise at times. It's really difficult to stand out, incredibly difficult. And you somehow managed to absolutely nail it. So just, I don't know the actual figures and numbers, but TikTok, I think, was actually where it kind
Yeah,
of like, was it that where it really kicked off?
it was. Yeah, that was the platform that kind of propelled the snowball effect. I have to give a lot of credit to Kush. She kind of took it upon herself during lockdown to. She was just kind of walking around. Well, we were living on site at the time in the HMO, and she was kind of like, well, why don't we just get a camera and just start documenting a few things, and get it out there and share some numbers and stuff. And I believe it or not, like, I am quite a private person, and it was a big deal for me to open up to social media and whoever's watching and be like, "Do you know what, this is what's happening, and this is how hopefully we can influence other people to start in property." So yeah, TikTok was kind of like where Kush, she started filming. She started giving me like scripts to say, and I was following a script. She was like, just say this, this, and this. I'll film it because she knows the business inside out. So, and eventually, yeah, we just started posting on TikTok. And I remember the first post, Andy. We were we had a couple of beers on a Friday night, as you do, and we just decided to edit a video. And I said, do you know what, Kush? I don't think it's going to work. I don't really like the video. And it was just a simple video of me picking up the keys to our new project that we've just finished now. This was back in December, January time. And I said, I don't think it's going to work. So she said, let me try it. So she edited it. She put some cool music on that's trending, which is important. And we woke up the next morning for work. Well, we were working on Saturday morning, and we woke up. It was probably like 7 o'clock, and I was like, gee, like, I couldn't believe it. It hit 250,000 views. And then by the afternoon, we were on like 600,000 views, and the TikTok account had gone from like 0 followers to like 50K, in overnight. And we were like, wow, there's a definite market for, and a lot of the age range is between 16 and 24. And I never actually went on TikTok at all. Like, I didn't really like that platform. But it's not about that. It's about who you can target as an audience and help people. So that's kind of what happened with TikTok, really.
Well, Well, that's staggering. So literally one post, in
Yeah,
24 hours it had reached 600,000 people, and
yeah,
you accumulated 50,000 followers.
yeah.
Wow. Okay, so that, I mean, that's how to go viral. And do you know why?
We think we know why, but then do you know what? We'll post a video and we'll think this is going to do absolutely amazing. Like this is the video that's going to send us to the
Yeah.
top, and it doesn't work. But then we'll do another video, and we got like 7 million or 6.9 million views on like 3 or 4 of our videos, then what we did was like we filtered that through from TikTok to Instagram, which is my platform. I love Instagram. I spend way too much time on it, and that was where I was able to get the messages, the direct messages, help people. I was getting loads of questions like, I'm young, I've got a bit of capital, how do I start? And it was just so nice for people to be like, you're inspiring me. And a funny story, Andy, we were doing the HMO, and like I mentioned previously, we were living on site, and I was painting the bedroom downstairs, and this DPD driver, he knocks on the door. And no, sorry, I tell a lie. I went out to get something from the van, and he was in his DPD delivery van, and I could see him staring at me, and I was like, oh god, like I don't know what I've done. Have I done anything to upset him? And he pulled up alongside me, and he was like, are you James from TikTok? And I was like, I felt amazing. I was like on top of the world, like, oh look, I'm a celebrity in Hull. And then it kind of snowballed from there, and we had people knocking on the window. Saying hi, I recognise the house from the video. It's great to see what you're doing,
Wow.
and it was just amazing. It really is amazing.
That's so cool. And so you took what was going on in TikTok, which was bonkers, and you leveraged that
Yeah,
onto Instagram and your other social channels. And I know you do a bit on Facebook as well, and you're a good member of the community, and you always sort of offer good advice and ask good questions. And what's happened since then, and what is the social media thing giving you? What's it helping you do, or what do you see? How do you kind of see it benefiting your business now?
yeah. So for us, it started off as just a hobby, and now it's actually become a business. You can actually get, I don't know if you know this, you can get paid from TikTok if you get so many views, etc. And like the algorithm kind of bumps you up to the top. But we're not doing it really for that. We're just doing it to get out our brand, which is James Property. That's our social media brand, and it's also helping massively with investors, which I'm sure you can relate to. Like we have had so many opportunities, so many inquiries to ask, can we invest? And we actually got investment from this. It was from Russia actually, but that was for the latest project. We secured it was like a £30,000 investment. So that helped us do the refurbishment project. So yeah, I mean that for us is we're building this brand, but also we want to help the 16 to 24-year-old age group like me. When I first started out, I didn't have a clue what I was doing, didn't know what to do with the property. So yeah, it's kind of like two avenues really.
Wow. And so how many followers have you amassed on Instagram now? It's quite a lot.
I think it's like 16,000, yeah,
Yeah.
16,000, and
Okay.
then 233 on TikTok. And to be fair, Andy, we haven't been posting as much because we got married. We're currently applying for visas together, and we don't really see a lot of each other. So we're just kind of like the time we spend together is our time. It's not social media, but it's not like we're putting it on hold. We're just kind of waiting for it to happen for the right time when she's here, and we can do that.
So that's such an interesting story, and I'm really pleased to hear that you're getting people interested in investing with you and working with you, and that's really cool. And I totally agree that social media is a really important tool. It's been massively important to me in our business, and lots of people that I work with, our masterminders and things like that. And it sounds like you're on a completely different level with it now, James. And it's just been so interesting seeing how you've done that. And how different it's been, and your videos are different, and the way you post is different, and it's really cool, and it's great to see that actually there is still the opportunity to do things totally different and make a big impact and use it to the benefit of growing something like a business.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point you've made. I mean, I think the way that we're doing it differently is we're not afraid to share anything. Like we are so transparent in everything we do. Perhaps we should be showing more of how difficult property is, because as you'll know, it is super difficult. And some of the videos I've criticised that we've put out and said, do you know what, it looks too easy. It isn't like this. The numbers look fantastic. It's the grind and like the years of investing and learning and self-educating and self-discipline and sacrificing, not going out on a weekend to save some money to pay for the painter and decorator. You know, it's like that's what you've got to do. And for me, we're releasing more content in the future, which will be around the struggles that you need to be made aware of. I know you've got a community, Andy, and you're also very transparent with how difficult it can be at times, and that's the important message. To do well on Instagram and social media and TikTok, you have to be able to have the mindset to share, and share truthfully as well. So,
and I think a lot of people appreciate that, and a lot of people now are savvy to the alternative, to the stuff that's glossed over, and to the stuff that probably isn't actually as it seems or appears to be. And I think we've got an important role in the community as investors. And I think as we talk about your case study as well, that there's some good reasons there as well, because people often have an opinion about property investors, particularly HMO property investors and HMOs in general. And I think actually making it a bit more human and not just this money-making scheme, which it isn't. It's a great business model. We can employ lots and lots of people. We can create really incredible accommodation. I think that there is a responsibility there, and it's really cool to hear you talk about that. And I'm not surprised at all that your engagement is as good as it is, because, and I watch your stuff for that reason as well. I love seeing, what you've been doing on the sites, and the fact that you've been rolling your sleeves up and getting dirty. And I don't do so much of that now, but maybe in other ways.
Yeah, of course.
But I definitely did do and used to do it, and have great memories of doing it. And it's a really important part of the business. I almost see it as the heritage of our business, actually. And I've got lots of pictures of those which are actually on. I don't even think I had a mobile phone. I got a camera on my phone when I first started. There's one of our actual pictures, but that's cool. Thanks for sharing all that, James. That was really interesting. So let's fast forward then to your actual property stuff and what's been going on, and let's get into this case study, because I think this is such a fascinating story. So, for all our listeners, as usual, James' case study is going to be available inside the HMO roadmap. And James talked about his story and the detail of this project that he bought, and this HMO and the condition and what you did with it. But you had a few problems along the way. So let's start with the headliners. Let's start with the figures.
Yeah.
Purchase price, 47,000. And this is where, James?
This is in Hull.
Cool. So all in costs are about 100,000.
All in, yeah.
Revaluation. Yeah. And your revaluation, what was the reval, James?
Yeah, so currently we're actually waiting for this to go through, but we had 3 independent estate agents. They gave all 200,000 basically, yeah. So some was at 210 to 200, 190. So I kind of went for 200, the middle ground.
Amazing. So when this gets when you do refinance it, actually you've done really well on that addition of value, which is fantastic to see.
Yeah.
And then gross monthly rent. It's up and running, and you've got tenants in now, haven't you, James?
Yeah, they're all in. They moved in 1st of September. Yeah, on a 52-week contract, which was brilliant. Fantastic. Yeah.
Fantastic. So student tenants.
Yeah.
And how much are they paying? What's the kind of the gross rent?
Yeah, so individually we obviously set the rooms somewhere between 95 a week up to 125 a week, and the gross rent is sorry, I have to check my figures. It's £28,860 a year, and month. Yeah, so it's decent, and monthly 2,400. So yeah.
Okay, so phenomenal, really. The gross yield. This might be one of the highest gross yields I've seen yet. We've done well over 20 case studies on the HMO roadmap already, and we've seen some great return on investments. But as far as gross yields go, I think you've smashed the record. 29%. It's incredible. Net yield, fantastic, and you're going to be recycling a load of capital out of that deal as well. So, first of all, well done, James, because that's an amazing project. And you're right. We've probably done what we just said we shouldn't do, which is make it sound easy and great. So,
yeah, it's true. Yeah, it shouldn't be like. I'll give you an example. And I was in Russia last week. I had probably 6 text messages. We had to go to the house on 3 separate occasions last week, and the numbers sound great, but you've also got to factor in, which we have done. We factored in like anticipated repair and maintenance costs and stuff. It was a problem with the shower. It was a long story, but we fixed it now. It's all fine. But it's them dreaded phone calls, I think, and it's not as easy as it sounds.
No. So tell us a little bit about the deal itself, James. The property, how you
Yeah.
found it, and what you did with it.
Yeah, so I kind of fell on it like unexpectedly. I was on another viewing, and I was a bit deflated because the property I wanted was just on the market for too much. And I was going home, coming down some of the streets in Hull, and I remember this one had like this huge like sold sign out of the front, and I was like, do you know what? I'm just gonna try and find it on Rightmove, see what it went for, see what it looks like inside, how many bedrooms, etc. And I couldn't find it anywhere on Rightmove, so I thought, right, I'll give the agent a ring. So I rang him up, and he was like, "Yeah, it's a timely phone call. It was at the very start of COVID as well. It's like we've just it's a repossession, and the buyers pulled out, and he told me what it sold for, which usually you don't get from the agent. So I knew what I was aiming at, that they would take an offer at 55,000, definitely, because that's what it was on before. But because it was part of like, I believe it was part of a bigger portfolio of houses that were repossessed. So I had some kind of like negotiation, skills to be able to get that down. Because I thought, well, if the bank kind of wants to sell it, I might be able to negotiate a little bit. So managed to get it for £47,000, which was fantastic. It was a very, very quick sale. All went through perfectly fine. But the house was massive. Like from the front, it looked super small, but it just kind of kept going and going and going. And I was a bit. I will be honest. Like there was a day before completion, and I was upstairs in one of the bedrooms, just kind of like thinking, like, this is the biggest project I'm going to undertake so far. I knew that I was going to convert it into or try and convert it into a five bed HMO with all 5 en suites as well. So yeah, I think the message of that kind of story is don't always assume that just because it has a sold sign, it doesn't necessarily mean that it is, and you should always follow up and find out. And luckily for me, I got a bargain, which was amazing.
Yeah, I mean, to get a house like that, it's difficult to comprehend that you can still buy something for that price. And I'm looking now
Yeah,
at the before photos,
yeah,
but especially when I look at the after photos, to think that this property could have been acquired in the last 12 months for that price
yeah.
is just phenomenal. Like, guys listening, you've got to go and have a look at this. It is absolutely amazing
I
what you
appreciate
did
that.
with it.
Thank you. Yeah.
So you purchased it, and how much did you spend on the refurb then, James?
Yeah, so the total cost was just over 50,000. So we knew we were tight on budget. So my rule of thumb, it's very, very rough. Don't take this as gospel, but I would always kind of work out how many bedrooms a house has got. So if it's got 5 bedrooms, I will always just do it like and work it as £10,000 per bedroom, and that will cover the kitchen, the co-living area, all the electrics, gas boiler. And I was actually bang on, which was amazing. I thought it was going to be a lot over, to be fair, as we're getting nearer. But what you have to remember, Andy, as well, is I was doing a lot of the work myself, while me and my wife and my dad also was helping massively on this. So we saved a lot of labour costs. So that's something that the listeners have to take into consideration as well. If they're not quite hands-on, the budget will probably be, a little bit higher. So yeah, what we did for 50,000 was absolutely fantastic. And the plan was to renovate the upstairs bedroom into a living quarters. Basically, it was a huge bedroom, had a big wardrobe, big ensuite, and we also put in the meantime like a little kitchen sink and microwave oven. And our plan was for me and Kush, my wife, to live there and be on site all the time and work on it when we could. And it worked really well. And then obviously we had to take out the kitchenette, because we're worried about getting a separate banding on the council tax. So I was like, do you know what, we'll take it out, and then hopefully we just get away with that the ensuite. So, but yeah, that's what we did, and it took us, how long did it take us? We started the work in July 2020, and we'd finished by March 2021. So yeah, it was a good project to be on.
Well, the design, the spec, the creativity in there, you've done stuff again that I've never seen with some of the lighting on the floor strips. I've
Yeah,
seen it in really high end stuff in hotels, but some of that stuff is just amazing, and your obviously your insight into what you could do and what materials you could use was obviously fantastic. And so no doubt I'm not surprised whatsoever that you managed to fill this with 5 tenants. At what point in the process, James, did you secure those tenants? Because with the student cycle,
That's a good question, Andy.
obviously we let well in advance of the moving in. So
Yeah.
typically, in fact, as we record this now, it's October. We're going to be starting to let next week for next summer. So how did you go about that bit while you were doing this refurb?
I couldn't sleep on a night. I had to, because obviously I didn't have planning permission, so I couldn't even advertise it. You know, it was, I actually secured my last tenant in August, like, so what, 2 months ago. Because
Okay.
we had lots of inquiries, but because the planning took so long to get through, which we'll come on to, I couldn't advertise it, and we had to get through all the inquiries and think who was a good match for each other. So yeah, I mean, I was worried, to be fair, but we got there in the end, and like what you just said, now we're already advertising, getting ready for next year's cohort, which is amazing.
So you found tenants right at the kind of the 11th hour, really,
Pretty much,
for them
yeah.
to move in September. So, and you mentioned you hadn't had planning. So let's talk about this.
And
So
I just want to know, on my wedding day, I was replying to spare room inquiries. That's how, and we got married like the June, and I was still like, that's how bad it was. Anyway, yeah. So the planning, yeah. Sorry.
I don't think Gemma would be surprised to find me doing the same, James, on our wedding day, to be honest. I'm embarrassed to say it, but okay, planning permission then. So this property was in an area where there was an Article 4 direction, wasn't it?
Yeah, unfortunately, yeah, it was.
And did you know this before you purchased it?
Yeah. So I did my research, and I know one of the letting agents in Hull. They're quite a big letting agent. I know her quite well, and I was kind of just texting back and forth, asking what I needed. She explained I wouldn't be eligible for the certificate of lawfulness, which my planning officer confirmed as well. So I knew I had to go through planning before I'd even bought the house. It was going through the conveyancing and stuff. So the first thing I did was, which I recommend to all listeners, you must get, for me anyway, you must get pre-app planning advice. It cost me £40 to get, and my planning officer, she was amazing. She gave me like pretty much a checklist of everything that I needed to tick off for that, to get approval, or for what I thought was to get approval. It covers things like parking, waste management, noise disturbances, cycling storage, room dimensions, and the big one, which was the percentage number of HMOs on the street at the time. So yeah, I mean, I actually got pre-app planning advice back. So I purchased the house it was the back end of June. It's about July time when we started refurbishment, and I didn't get the pre-app planning until August. So we were a month into the refurbishment, and then I finally got the planning permission submitted in the October, but I didn't get a decision until the following June. So it took almost a year to get.
And did you buy it cash then, James?
Yeah,
And know you were taking a gamble on this?
Yeah, I bought it cash, and I knew it was a gamble, but I was so confident, Andy. Like, as soon as I bought the house, I was like, I've cracked it. Like, I've got, I knew. I instantly thought I'd been given HMO status, and I was so wrong, and I was so naive. And the lessons I've learned from that is obviously a huge learning curve for my next investments, and whoever I work with in the future will know this is my story and this is what I want to do to make sure we don't make these same mistakes again, basically.
So how did it go with the planning and the planning application then? So you'd bought it, you'd started the refurb, then you got into the process of applying.
Yeah.
That took ages. Mm-hmm. So I assume during this time you were cracking on with the refurb and
Correct.
ploughing more and more money into this
Correct.
property.
Yeah.
And really kitting it out as a HMO. So how what happened with planning? How did it all unravel?
Yeah, so we got to about the March time, and we'd finished, and then I got an email in the April saying that we've got a meeting on the 7th of April, basically the committee meeting, which, because I'd had a complaint, I don't think it goes to committee all the time. Correct me if I'm wrong, Andy. I don't think it always goes to committee, but this one did, because I had a complaint from an association around that area. So what basically happened was I got this invite through to say that you're allowed to speak at the committee meeting to put your points forward and get it passed. So before doing anything, I think my first speech that I wrote would have qualified for like a 12,000 word dissertation. Like, it was so long. Like, my skills in my degree had come through. I was referencing everything. I was taking all the points from the policies in the council. And then I reached out to you, and you was like, "Nah, mate, you get like 3 minutes. Like, that's all you get. You can't go in there with like a full hour, you know." So I was like, "Sugar." So I needed to condense that. And I walked into the first meeting. So the first meeting was on the 7th of April. I walked in, and without any words being said at all, the councillors kind of said, "Does anyone want to defer a particular application because they require more evidence?" And unfortunately, mine, which was a big talking point, it was deferred on the grounds for they didn't feel that the parking survey was done sufficiently during COVID time. They didn't feel like it replicated a true street. So, I mean, I could argue that by saying, well, there was more people working at home, therefore there was more cars on the street, and I put my point across. But they didn't care. They didn't want to hear from me. So we got deferred. And then but after the first meeting, Andy, it was quite funny because I actually met one of the objectors, and he basically was saying, "Look, we don't want this happening at all. We don't want any more HMOs in the area." And I can sympathise with that, because some of the landlords in that area are disgraceful. Like, they don't care. And I actually have this newspaper article here. He wrote a newspaper about me. And it basically says that James from your...
So he wrote an article about you?
Yeah, he sent this to all the councillors. It's the Newland Journal. And he sent this before the meeting. He's never met me before. He took a picture of the house.
For our listeners, James is quite literally holding up a newspaper article, and the headline says, "Not another HMO." Yeah. I didn't know anything about this part of the story.
So, I was upset. It was an awkward exchange as well, because we were outside the meeting after it just been deferred, and he was
bet it was.
And he was like, "Oh, by the way, I wrote an article about you. Here you go." And I was like, "Oh, right, thank you." And I was quite upset. But I mean, he says like, "Yeah, James of York." It sounds like a poem. Like, has been submitted.
James of York
has submitted a 4-bed application to be turned into a 5. Blah blah blah. And I said to him, I reasoned with him. I said, "Look, you probably hear this all the time, but I'm not the landlord that you expect. I am totally different. I make sure that they will look after the street. I make sure the bins, because there was a big problem with the bins. Everyone on that street leaves the bins at the front of the house, and it looks a mess. So I specifically said, you make sure that it's at the back of the house. I go down for like monthly inspections. Like, we're good landlords. Like, we make sure, like, me and my wife, like, we're very strict but very fair." And he was kind of buying it, but anyway, it got deferred. So we went to the second meeting, and on the morning of the second meeting, they requested a site visit to come and look at the parking situation. And it was really funny because Kush said to me in the morning, she was like, "Do you know what? We should pretend that we're sweeping the street and put out cones in the street to stop people from parking in outside the house to make it look like there was less cars." Luckily, no one actually came down the street, so we were fine. But the planning officer came out. I mean, Andy, I was living there. I was taking parking photos at 5 o'clock in the morning up until 11 o'clock at night, like, snapshots and stuff. So when we got to the second meeting, they didn't mention anything about parking. They just said that they went on to another problem, which was the number of HMOs. And because my house, you couldn't write it, because my property was exactly on 50%, but because it didn't exceed, the policy wording said if it doesn't exceed 50, you're allowed to have it. But because it was on bang on 50, the councillors wanted to take it to another recount. And let me tell you, the planning officers were really upset about this. They wanted another recount, and they were talking like 0.01%. Yeah.
They wanted to find one more HMO on the street and find a technical objection to your application.
That was it. And we were talking like 0%, and that is like 0.235, whatever it would have been over, would have lost all my investment, or it would have stopped me from getting HMO status, which was heartbreaking when you think about it. But so yeah, we went to the third meeting. They'd exhausted all the options.
So on the third committee
Yeah.
meeting,
Yeah, so sorry. So the second meeting, they deferred it for a recount. Private housing had to come in, explain that
okay,
there was exactly bang on 50%. And it got to the point where they'd exhausted all the options, and this was now in June. This was 2nd of June because they had the elections in May, which may have influenced decisions, but I'm not here to say. But they got to the point where they couldn't exhaust anything else, and they had to give it because there was nothing else they couldn't do. And they saw the refurbishment, they saw the standard, they saw the type of tenant that we were getting. They saw our systems and management in place, and they're doing their job, and I respect that. And eventually, yeah, we got the result, and I was super happy in the end.
so you kind of did it. I mean, I'm so glad you got it in the end, and I think there's some really interesting points. Almost serendipitous, perhaps, that you met this chap outside and were able to explain that you're not the landlord that they've got the issues with, and I think to some extent the committee and local community members need to understand that if they really do want to make fundamental improvements and changes to the HMO communities, and particularly in areas like Hull and Sheffield and lots of areas I invest, there are often big, dense student communities. But if you don't give good landlords an opportunity to come in and actually make an impact and improve the spec and the competition, then it's very difficult to almost persuade that change that they really want, because at the end of the day they can insist on certain things, but it doesn't ever mean that it'll be done
Yeah,
properly, kept up with, look good. So it's really interesting to hear that. But you kind of went about this in the reverse order to certainly how I would advise most people
yeah.
do it. I mean, I would suggest you buy it subject to planning, buy it with an option while you get planning, something like that, or even buy it, get planning before you start the
Exactly.
work.
Yeah,
But you really
exactly.
kind of threw everything. Was there a point, James, where I imagine there was? Was there a point where you really thought this could go in the wrong direction?
100%. I was looking at plan Bs, plan Cs, Ds, all the way to Z. Like I was looking at. I mean, I'd already had a value around as an estate agent. He's a friend as well, and he basically leveled with me and said, "You've changed it now into a HMO because you've added en suites into all the rooms. It's not even a family home anymore. You're going to appeal to a lot of less people will want to buy this. It's a very niche market that you're going to be having to sell to without planning and knowing that you've had a planning application rejected as well." I think the take home message was, don't do it this way, quite simply put. But I must also say that the HMO community on Facebook, Andy, was fantastic. I met a few people. I spoke to yourself about this as well. You definitely gave me some sleepless nights after I've spoken to you, because you were truthful with me. You was honest with me and said, it's you shouldn't have done it this way. And all the listeners who are listening, don't do it this way. I would never advise you to do it this way. But it paid off. We look on, upwards and onwards and on to the next one. And I've definitely learned from this, and it will stick with me forever. So, yeah,
I think most of the places where I invest, where there's an Article 4 direction, the threshold is actually 10 or 20%. So 50% is actually an incredibly high
yeah,
threshold. Yeah, a lot of places now won't even consider the application if there's more than 10 or 20%, and it's really just a blanket no at that level. If it's less than that, they're still going to make you jump through certain hoops and try and find reasons to reject it. But I think almost fortunate that Hull's policy isn't that low, that it's actually as high as 50%, which is quite unusual, actually.
Well, in the meeting, Andy, it's a good point you've made. They actually did say that they were going to be changing the policy. It's up for review, and they're going to be looking at a lower threshold. That was something I took home from the meeting. They're going to be looking at the 10%, the 20% margin now. So,
Yeah. So, I mean, it's an incredible story, James, and I'm so glad you got it right at the end. And it is an incredible project, and one that I'm sure is going to stay in your portfolio for a long time. What's the next move with the next HMO? Are you going to try and buy in the same location? Are you going to buy it differently?
yeah, same location, definitely. To be honest, I would only now look at buying a HMO which either has the approved status, the planning permission in place, or I mean, if I wasn't going to buy in that location, then it would obviously have to be somewhere which wasn't an Article 4. But yeah, there'd be a million things I'd do differently now to mitigate those risks, definitely.
And is it fair to say that it would cost you more to buy something that's essentially already an existing HMO? And I mean, I know a lot of what I buy is existing HMOs for that reason.
Yeah.
Not everything, has to be an existing HMO if there's no Article 4 direction, but is that going to be more of a challenge from a price point of view for you now moving forwards?
Yeah, definitely. I'm used to buying houses at this price point. I'm very fortunate and very lucky to get them at that price point. I completed on the last project that was 50,000. This one was 47. The one before that was 39,999, like a pound below the stamp. So I'm very fortunate. I'm looking at the market now, and there's no houses like this at the minute. The market's on fire. But that doesn't stop me. I'm not bothered. Like if I've got if the numbers add up and the finances there, and we have the private investors coming on board with us, which is why I was in Russia as well. Actually, it was interesting. There's no stopping us. We want to buy more houses, more HMOs, but we're going to do it right the next time. So yeah, it's a journey. It's a fun journey.
It certainly is. But is it a journey you're enjoying, James? I mean, you've got a big smile on your face. You've always got a big smile on your face on social media. You seem to take with the rough with the smooth. Are you enjoying it all?
No, I'm not enjoying it all.
Enjoying the process of building the business?
Yeah, no, well, you've got to enjoy the process. Yeah, I'm not enjoying it all, but I'm enjoying the journey, definitely. Because I don't ever... I've been listening to my wife, Kush, and we've had discussions, and we just kind of come to the point where, we read a lot, we listen to a lot of podcasts together, and we get to the point where if you're always putting happiness in the future, you're never going to get to it because your expectations are always going to go away from you. So it's kind of like, enjoy it now, enjoy this journey, enjoy the problems you're going to have. And if something bad happens, look positive about it, and then be happy in the moment now. And that's the real kind of take-home message that I'm learning. Because before, Andy, I was a stress head. I'm an overthinker. I think too much about the littlest things. And I'm kind of coming to the point now where, maybe because I'm married now, I don't know what it is, but it's just relax. There's bigger things in the world. Health is so important. As long as your loved ones are okay, that's more important. It's the property that enjoy the journey towards that, towards the goal.
Well, you know what, James, I completely agree, and I think that is a perfect way to end our episode today. You've taken us through this roller coaster journey on this case study and this remarkable sort of entrance into social media, if you like, all sort of juggled with your recent marriage and trips to Russia and things like that. So it's great to hear. I probably don't need to ask this question today, actually, but James, if anyone wants to connect, how should they do it? Where is best to reach out to you?
Yeah, reach out to me on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. Now we're pushing that a little bit more. It's at James Property _ that's the handle. Any questions that you've got about what we've discussed today or anything else related to property, just drop me a message, and I'd be more than happy to answer.
James, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on. A good chat. You've enjoyed a beer while we've been recording today. And you know what? I'm looking forward to seeing what you do next, and no doubt getting you back on at some point in the future to share your updates and tell us a little bit more about the projects that you've been doing.